Yesterday afternoon, the government revealed plans to end the automatic early release of convicted terrorists.
Well, the announcement came just a day after an attack in Streatham, South London, when convicted terrorist Eamonn was shot dead by police after he attacked two people with a stolen knife.
Well, it also follows November's London Bridge attack when two died and others were injured at the hands of Usman Khan, a recently released terrorist who'd been let out on licence.
And with both incidents shining a light on our criminal justice system, today we're joined by Home Secretary Priti Patel. And thank you. It's great to have you here today to be able to talk about this. Lots of people thinking about this morning. And yesterday, the Justice Secretary announced this emergency legislation. So could you just explain to us exactly what that is and what that means for us?
Well, that's right. We have, rightly so, made the decision that we want to end this automatic release for early prisoners, basically, for terrorist offenders. So we want to stop that. And that is why we've announced emergency legislation. So we're going to bring that in as soon as possible. And there are some really important facts around this legislation in terms of what it will stop doing. So first and foremost, it'll stop terrorist offenders being automatically released in the way in which we've seen, obviously, Usman Khan and Eamonn being released from prison. Those two individuals did not go in front of anybody. They were just released automatically halfway through their sentence. They did not go through a parole board process, so they were not assessed. They were not checked over, effectively. They were not assessed in terms of their conduct in prison and whether or not they were suitable to be released. We're going to change that. We're going to stop that. My own view, the Prime Minister agrees with this as well. This is the right thing to do. We cannot keep having terrorist offenders. These are offenders that have been convicted, put in prison for terrorist offences. We've got to stop that. We've got to stop them from having this early release and this automatic release where they're not checked and where they're not sitting in front of a parole board.
So they'll serve their full sentences and they'll spend more time in prison. And in the case of Amann's mother, Halima Faraz Khan, she said that she'd visited her son on Thursday when he seemed normal, that they'd spoken on the phone just hours before the attack. Her polite and lovely boy had been brainwashed by material he saw online and further radicalised by his time in the high-security Belmarsh prison in south-east London. So they'll serve longer in prison and potentially have longer to be even greatly radicalised.
So there are a couple of things here, first of all. I mean, the emergency legislation, first of all, will address this issue about ending this automatic early release. We need people to serve their full sentences. So that is the first point. And then before they're released, they need to go in front of a parole board. Now, serving full sentences, quite frankly, if you're convicted of offences, you should expect to serve your full sentence. Now, how offenders are dealt with in prison is clearly a much wider issue that we have to look at in terms of our prison estates. This is difficult. We have, for example, de-radicalisation programmes, and obviously we have counter-terrorist offenders going through a range of programmes, and there's a range of issues and, you know, ways in which they are supported and supervised in prison. But I think the point is, you know, first and foremost, the expectation, I think the public would expect them to serve their full sentence. And then it's a case of what we do with them in prison, how we de-radicalise them. If they can be de-radicalised as well, we have to remember that, you know, people are not automatically de-radicalised.
And if they can't, I mean, regardless of whether they do their full sentence, then it's, you know, it's just sort of kicking the can down the road, isn't it? Then they'll do their full sentence and still come out, and if they're still radicalised, then what?
But, however, throughout that full sentence, so we are also bringing in a counter-terrorism bill, and this is something I announced 2 weeks ago, where we've made it quite clear that those individuals that are perpetrating counter-terrorism activities, the minimum sentence they will get is 14 years. They don't even get that right now. So we're going to change the sentencing legislation around that.
And they'll serve that as a full
They will serve that as a minimum sentence, and then, of course, they'll be supervised, they'll all be assessed, and it'll be down to parole boards, supervisors, to assess whether or not they are suitable to even being released at the end of that sentence.
Changes in the law are generally not retrospective. So what about those prisoners who are currently being held for terrorist offences? Does this new legislation extend to them as well?
It will apply to them, and that is the purpose of this emergency legislation, because we simply cannot have individuals halfway through their sentence being released in a way in which they're not supervised and they're not assessed. So that assessment and supervision is absolutely crucial. And it is the public, your viewers, will rightly ask, why have we not had those checks and balances in place in the first instance? That is why we are doing this. There will be a pipeline of prisoners. I think we have to be very clear.
Why did it take you so long, then?
Well, I mean, we've been doing this, obviously, for 6 months. I've been Home Secretary for 6 months. And it wasn't until...
3 attacks on your watch?
Well, it wasn't until the Usman Khan incident, which was Fishmongers Hall. That is when we announced that we would bring in new legislation through a counter-terrorism bill. We've announced that, and that is coming in the first 100 days. Absolutely, we are doing that, and that is happening. But obviously, this whole issue, the loopholes, these are the type of loopholes that we've had to shut down. And the Justice Secretary, because rightly, this is the criminal justice system. This isn't just the Home Office. This is the justice system, the courts, prisons, probation. We're looking at the loopholes there, and that's what we're trying to shut down.
This is... you talk about, you know, it's going to come heavily on our prison service, this for sure, who, as we already know, are short-staffed. One of the terror attacks that we were talking about, one of the 3, happened in prison at HMP Whitemoor. This was an attack on a prison staff by 2 inmates with bladed weapons. This was only last month. They're short-staffed, and now they're going to have inmates in for longer. How is this going to work?
There's a lot of work. In fact, credit to the Justice Secretary, there is a great deal of work that's taking place around prisons. So we are investing £100 million to recruit more probation officers, but also more specialist counter-terrorism probation officers. This was part of the package of announcements.
What about general staffing in prisons?
So it varies, of course, in terms of prisons, the prisons' estates. Obviously, we're speaking about high-secure counter-terrorist offenders. They have a different supervisory regime, different types of individuals and supervisors that monitor them and look after them and watch them. But across the prison estate more generally, I think it's important to just differentiate here. We do need more officers. We need to invest in probation. We are doing that. We are also investing in 10,000 new prison places. We need that for capacity. I mean, it is a fact to protect the public from criminals. It is inevitable. I'm recruiting 20,000 more police officers. With more police officers, you can expect more arrests.
What about the 74 extremists who are out on licence now? How safe are we? I mean, they're out there. They've got through this loophole and they're out on the street.
Sudesh Aman had 20 officers around him. That's why they were there so quickly. It didn't stop him committing his terrible crime. But he had a team of 20. And though they were there very fast, there's only so much our amazing police can actually do. So what about those 74 people? Are there 20 people around them?
So I'm not going to give you the numbers. Are there 20 per person? I can tell you now what we saw on Sunday in terms of that policing operation, covert and overt, was just incredible. It really was. And I've spent a lot of time, actually, with counter-terrorism police.
So why are they on the street if they're taking up that many police resources?
But this is the nature of the licensing regimes that have been put in place in the past, and that is what we're changing. So I come back to the counter-terrorism bill. Yes, 14 years minimum sentences. We're changing the supervision, the licensing regime around offenders. We are going to make them much more stringent. You know, it is a fact. We are having to use intense police resourcing, the most specialist police resourcing, counter-terrorism police officers, to monitor, to supervise these individuals. We need to do that. We absolutely need to do that, and we're not going to compromise on that. I'm unapologetic about public security and public safety. Our officers are trained and they will continue to do that. But we need to change the regime, what goes on in the prisons, the sentencing regime, the licensing regime.
So under this new legislation, those 74 wouldn't actually be on the street?
It would be different. They would not. Absolutely. I mean, I can't speak about the individual cases because obviously they've all been convicted for different aspects of counter-terrorism offences.
There are 20,000 apparently on watch lists, 3,000 part of an active investigation. Now, that is a hell of a lot of manpower involved in policing all of that. Now, you said, and the Prime Minister said, that there were going to be 20,000 extra police on the streets or in the force.
Yes.
That takes a lot of time because you have to, first of all, they've got to be recruited. They've got to want to do the job.
We're doing that now.
They come in, they're recruited, then they're trained. How long before that 20,000 number is on the streets?
They're already coming out, actually. I mean, so we'll talk about police recruitment. I mean, that is going great guns. It really is. And actually, I just think that speaks to, you know, the reputation of the police, the amazing work that they do, the great public service. In our first few months alone, when we launched our police recruitment campaign, we had over 39,000 applicants, which I think says a great deal. But, Phillip, just to your point about the individuals that are out and the people, obviously, that are being watched, we shouldn't overlook the fact, yes, our police officers and our specialist police officers do amazing work, but also we have intelligence and security services as well. They are the people that nobody hears about, we don't talk about them. They are absolutely watching these individuals, and it's not just physically, it's online. The range of monitoring and surveillance that takes place, rightly so.
But there's only so much you
incredible.
can do.
We're investing in them constantly, and I spend, there are many days every week where I spend a great deal of time with them. I see what they do operationally. I see the tactics that they deploy. We have enormous investments going into, our agencies, intelligence agencies, ranging from MI5 to 6, GCHQ, but also to counter-terrorism police. The announcement that I made 2 weeks ago, £90 million of new investment just in CT, counter-terrorism. Plus, we've got new investments in terms of how they work, how they pool intelligence and information. These are the individuals and the organisations and agencies that keep our country safe.
Anna, that's my question. How safe are we right now as we sit here today?
Well, I'd say we are safe, actually, and it's down to the incredible work, Holly. I mean, they do amazing work. And it's not just watching people. We are safe because of the intelligence and the security relationships, partnerships and networks that we have across the world, actually, with our counterparts internationally.
There's two people
and
in
how we
Streatham would
pull
probably
that
disagree
together.
with that, obviously.
Well, our thoughts are with them, the people that are the victims, and we should never forget the victims of these atrocities, and they are atrocities. But what I would say to the British public, it's not just about the investment, it's the way in which we work together internationally, the collaboration, the agencies. These are amazing individuals in the agencies, but also the technology that we use, the resources that we put in them. We invest in them for a reason, and we're constantly upscaling them. In the time we're having this conversation, don't forget, technology is evolving and changing. Criminals are always finding new ways in which they can cause harm. We're constantly trying to be ahead of the curve, which is why we work in the way in which we do.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
For coming today.